The great crystal dome of Nexus Prime sparkled under the light of 3 suns. Inside the massive structure, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that floated in the center of the room. The air buzzed with tension as translators worked to convert dozens of different languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Cathara's blue skin shimmered as she moved her 4 arms in frustration. The Delani woman had traveled across 3 star systems to reach this emergency meeting, and she could feel the fear radiating from every delegate in the room. Her large black eyes scanned the faces around the table, seeing the same worry reflected in each one. "The Vorthan Empire has consumed another system," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of billions of lost lives. "The Altair colonies are gone. Every planet stripped clean. Every living being either dead or enslaved." The insectoid representative from the Zephyrian Collective clicked his mandibles together nervously. Dr. Zephlon had seen many wars in his long life, but nothing like this. The Vorthans moved through space like a plague, leaving nothing but empty worlds behind them. "That makes 3 complete systems in as many months," Dr. Zephlon said, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic display that showed the expanding red zone of Vorthan control. "At this rate, they will reach the core worlds within a year." The room erupted in worried chatter. The Nexari, with their purple crystalline bodies, hummed in distress. The furry Corvani gnashed their teeth and growled low warnings. Even the normally calm Etherians, beings of pure energy who rarely showed emotion, flickered with obvious anxiety. Admiral Vextar of the Corvani Defense Fleet slammed his clawed fist on the table. "We need to stop talking and start fighting. My ships are ready to—" "Your ships will be destroyed before they reach the first Vorthan patrol," Cathara interrupted. "We all know what happened to the combined Meridian Corvani fleet at Kepler. 300 ships reduced to space dust in less than an hour." The silence that followed was heavy with the memory of that defeat. The Vorthans had weapons that could crack planets and shields that seemed impossible to break. Their ships moved in perfect formation, each one the size of a small moon. When they arrived at a system, resistance was not just futile, it was a death sentence. Dr. Zephlon cleared, his throat a sound like leaves rustling in the wind. "Perhaps it is time to consider the old stories." The other delegates turned to look at the elderly historian. Zephlon was known throughout the galaxy for his vast knowledge of ancient times, but even he rarely spoke of the oldest legends. "What old stories?" asked Captain Mordaunt of the Nexari fleet, her crystalline voice ringing like wind chimes. Zephlon activated a small data crystal, and images began to appear above the table. Ancient symbols, faded star charts, and fragments of text in languages, so old that only a few scholars could read them. "There are records," he began slowly, "scattered across dozens of worlds buried in the deepest archives. They speak of a time before the current galactic order, when a different kind of war raged among the stars." Cathara leaned forward, her interest piqued. The Delani were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and their oral traditions went back thousands of years. "You speak of the Ghost Wars?" "Some call them that," Zephlon nodded. "Others know them as the Time of Legends. But all the stories agree on one thing. There was a species that fought in those ancient conflicts, a species unlike any other, the Adei." Holograms shifted, showing crude drawings and primitive sculptures found on dead worlds. They depicted bipedal creatures with 5-fingered hands and strange flat faces. The beings looked small and weak compared to most galactic species, but the art always showed them in positions of power and respect. They called themselves humans, Zephlon continued. And according to every record I have found, they were the most dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Vextar snorted in disbelief. Humans? Those look like children. How could something so small be dangerous? Size was not their strength, the historian replied. According to the fragments I have translated, humans possessed something that made them nearly impossible to defeat. They called it determination, or sometimes stubbornness. When other species would surrender or retreat, humans would keep fighting. The hologram showed more images. Massive space battles with tiny human ships darting between enormous alien vessels, humans standing alone against overwhelming odds, and strangest of all, humans working together with other species as equals. The records speak of humans who would sacrifice their own lives to save complete strangers, Zephlon said. They tell of human commanders who could inspire soldiers from a dozen different species to fight as one army. Most incredibly, they describe humans who could look at an impossible battle and somehow find a way to win. Captain Mordan's crystalline form flickered with skepticism. These sound like creation myths, not historical records. Every species has stories of ancient heroes who could perform miracles. Perhaps, Zephlon admitted, but I have found something that is definitely not mythology. The hologram changed again, this time showing a star chart that looked both ancient and oddly familiar. In the center was a small yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. This is from a Vorthon military database that we captured 3 months ago, the historian explained. It shows a system at the very edge of known space, far beyond any current civilization. The Vorthons have been avoiding this region for centuries, but their records do not explain why. Kethara studied the chart carefully. What makes this system special? According to the ancient records, this is where the humans came from. Their homeworld orbits that yellow star. The room fell silent. Several delegates looked at each other with expressions of confusion and hope. Are you suggesting, Admiral Vexitar said slowly, that these legendary humans still exist? I am suggesting, Zephlon replied, that we may have nothing left to lose by finding out. Far across the galaxy, beyond the reach of current technology and outside the borders of known space, a small blue and green planet continued its ancient dance around a yellow sun. On the surface of this world, billions of beings went about their daily lives, completely unaware that their names were being spoken in a desperate council of war. In the depths of space, Vorthon scout ships moved steadily outward, following their Emperor's orders to map every system and catalog every potential threat. They had heard the old stories too, but they considered them nothing more than fairy tales meant to frighten children. Soon, both sides would learn the truth about legends. War Prime Gorthax stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among the Vorthons. After months of traveling through empty space, his scout fleet had finally found something worth conquering. The planet looked perfect. Vast oceans, green continents, and the energy signatures of a thriving civilization. His sensors counted over 7 billion life forms scattered across the surface. Even better, they appeared to be the legendary humans that the ancient databases mentioned. If the old stories were true, destroying this species would eliminate the last hope of the pathetic Galactic Council. "Begin the attack," Gorthax commanded, his voice a low growl that echoed through the ship. "I want this world burned clean within the hour." 50 Vorthon warships moved into attack formation around Earth. Each vessel was the size of a city, armed with weapons that could crack continents. The humans below had no idea what was coming. At least, that's what Gorthax thought. Deep, beneath the mountains of Colorado, alarms began to sound in the Earth Defense Force Command Center. Captain Jake Morrison looked up from his morning coffee as red lights flashed across the massive display screens that covered the walls. "Contact!" shouted Lieutenant Amy Carter from her position at the sensor station. 50 unknown vessels entering orbit. They're big, sir. Really big." Jake set down his cup and walked to the center of the room. He had been waiting for this moment his entire career. Earth had been watching the galaxy for 300 years, keeping track of every war and every threat while rebuilding their own strength. The planet's leaders knew that eventually someone would find them. "Signal status?" Jake asked. "They're not responding to any communication attempts," reported Sergeant Danny Rodriguez from the communications desk. "But, sir, we're picking up weapons charging. Multiple targeting locks on major population centers." Jake nodded grimly. After all these years of peace, it looked like Earth was going to war again. He pressed a button on his command chair that connected him to every military base on the planet. "This is Captain Morrison. Code Black is now in effect. All units to battle stations. The guests we've been expecting have finally arrived, and they didn't come here to talk." Lieutenant Amy Carter was already running toward the hangar bay when the announcement ended. She had been training for this moment since she was old enough to fly, learning the lessons that Earth's military had perfected over centuries of conflict. Her fighter squadron was considered the best of the best, but today they would face their first real test. The hangar bay doors opened to reveal 12 sleek fighters that looked nothing like the massive Vorthon warships above. Earth's vessels were small and fast, built for speed and maneuverability rather than raw firepower. Amy's fighter was barely larger than an old-fashioned airplane, but it contained technology that the rest of the galaxy had never seen. "Dragon Squadron, this is Dragon Leader," Amy said into her radio as she launched into space. "Remember your training. These aliens think they know how to fight, but they've never fought humans before." The Vorthan ships opened fire first, sending massive beams of energy toward the surface of Earth. But the human fighters were already moving, dancing between the weapon blasts with impossible precision. Amy's squadron split into 3 groups, each one attacking from a different angle. Gorthax watched in confusion as the tiny human ships moved through his formation like angry insects. His weapons officers were firing constantly, but somehow they couldn't hit anything. The human vessels seemed to know where each shot would be before it was fired. "How are they moving like that?" demanded his tactical officer, a younger Vorthan, whose scales were pale with fear. "It doesn't matter," Gorthax snarled. "There are only 12 of them. Concentrate all fire on—" His words were cut off as explosions rocked his flagship. Somehow, one of the human fighters had gotten close enough to attack his main weapons array. The tiny vessel spiraled away before his gunners could respond, leaving behind a trail of disabled systems. Amy Carter pulled her fighter into a tight turn that would have killed any other species in the galaxy. Human pilots could handle forces that would crush alien bones and rupture alien organs. More importantly, human pilots could think and react faster than any computer system the Vorthons had ever built. "Dragon 3, Dragon 7, take out the ship on the left," she ordered. "Dragon 5, Dragon 9, hit the command vessel. Everyone else, follow me." The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. When it was over, 49 Vorthon warships were nothing but burning wreckage floating in Earth's orbit. The 50th ship had been disabled, but not destroyed, its crew stunned into unconsciousness by weapons that the aliens had never encountered before. Colonel Ryan Hayes led the boarding party that captured the surviving Vorthon vessel. His special operations team moved through the alien ship like ghosts, taking prisoners and gathering intelligence with surgical precision. The Vorthons had expected savage barbarians, but the humans who captured them were disciplined soldiers who followed strict rules about treating prisoners. Within hours, the captured aliens found themselves in clean cells with medical care and regular meals. It was better treatment than most species received from the Vorthons themselves. Under careful questioning, the prisoners revealed everything about their empire. They spoke of conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and a military force that numbered in the thousands of ships. They also revealed something more important: the location of the Vorthon fleet that was currently destroying the Kepler system. Captain Lisa Brooks stood in the briefing room of the EDS Ranger, looking at the holographic display that showed the route to Kepler. Her ship was one of Earth's newest vessels, designed for long-range exploration and combat. Today, it would carry the first human expedition beyond their solar system in over 3 centuries. "The Meridians are still alive," she told her senior officers. "According to our prisoners, the Vorthons are using them as slave labor in the mining operations. We have maybe days before they're worked to death." Commander Alex Turner studied the tactical data with the eye of someone who had spent his entire life learning how to win impossible battles. 50 ships against 300. The odds are not good. "The odds never are," Lisa replied with a smile that would have terrified any Vorthon who saw it. "But we're human. Bad odds are what we do best." Dr. Maria Santos finished loading the medical supplies that would be needed for Meridian refugees. As the ship's doctor, she had studied alien biology for years, preparing for the day when Earth would rejoin the galactic community. She never imagined her first patients would be rescued slaves. As the Ranger and 49 other Earth vessels prepared to depart, intercepted Vorthon communications revealed that the enemy was mobilizing their entire fleet. 10,000 warships were being recalled from across the Empire to deal with this new threat. The aliens were about to learn why some legends should never be tested. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system, and Captain Lisa Brooks felt her heart sink at what she saw. The once beautiful crystal cities of the Meridians were gone, replaced by massive mining operations that scarred the planet's surface like infected wounds. Smoke rose from 1,000 different locations where alien machines stripped away everything of value. "My God," whispered Dr. Maria Santos from her position at the science station. "What have they done to this place?" The Meridians had been known throughout the galaxy as artists and philosophers. Their crystal cities had been considered among the most beautiful structures ever built. Now those same crystals were being harvested as raw materials, and the people who had created them were working themselves to death in the toxic atmosphere. Commander Alex Turner studied the tactical display with growing anger. 300 Vorthon ships surrounded the planet in a defensive formation that would have been impossible for any normal fleet to break. The alien vessels were arranged in overlapping fields of fire, with massive battleships protecting smaller support craft. "They're using the planet as a shield," Alex reported. "If we attack directly, they'll destroy the mining operations and kill every Meridian on the surface." Lisa nodded grimly. The Vorthons had learned from their defeat at Earth and were not taking any chances. They expected the humans to charge in recklessly, giving them time to slaughter millions of innocent prisoners. They were about to learn that humans rarely did what their enemies expected. Commodore Steve Parker commanded the Human Liberation Fleet from his flagship, the EDS Freedom. He had studied every recorded battle in galactic history, looking for patterns and weaknesses that other commanders had missed. What he had discovered was that most alien species fought like they lived, predictably and according to rigid rules. All ships, this is Commodore Parker, he announced over the fleet communications. Operation Shepherd is now active. Remember, our job is not to destroy the enemy. Our job is to save the Meridians. The human ships spread out across the system in a pattern that looked random to Vorthan observers. Some vessels moved toward the planet, others headed for the outer asteroid belt, and a few seemed to be retreating back toward empty space. The alien commanders watched in confusion as the human fleet appeared to scatter in panic. Commander Vashamal of the Vorthan occupation. Force had been expecting a glorious battle. He commanded more ships than any human fleet could possibly match, and his defensive position was perfect. When the humans broke formation and ran in different directions, he assumed they had finally realized how hopeless their situation was. Pursue the fleeing vessels, he ordered his subordinates. Do not let any of them escape to spread word of our strength. It was exactly what Steve Parker had been counting on. The Vorthan fleet split into multiple groups, each one chasing a different cluster of human ships. As soon as they left their defensive formation, the real battle began. Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. Her fighter squadron was hidden among the asteroids at the system's edge, waiting for the Vorthans to make their mistake. When a group of enemy battleships moved to intercept what they thought was a retreating human force, Kate and her pilots struck. Human fighters poured out of the asteroid field like angry wasps, hitting the surprised Vorthan ships from every direction at once. Kate's squadron had been practicing this maneuver for months, using the asteroids as cover while they positioned themselves for the perfect ambush. "Phoenix Squadron, light them up!" Kate shouted into her radio as her fighter dove toward the largest Vorthan battleship. The alien vessel was the size of a mountain, covered in weapon turrets and armor plating that could withstand almost any attack. Almost any attack from a normal opponent. Kate's fighter carried weapons designed by human engineers who had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of war. Her missiles punched through the Vorthan shields like they were made of paper, and her energy weapons carved through armor that was supposed to be indestructible. But more importantly, she was attacking weak points that no alien commander would ever think to protect. Humans had a saying, "If you can't go through something, go around it. If you can't go around it, go under it. If you can't go under it, find a different way." Kate found a different way. Her damaged fighter, streaming smoke and sparks, dove straight into the Vorthan battleship's main hangar bay. The aliens had never imagined that an enemy pilot would sacrifice their own ship to destroy theirs, but Kate had already ejected safely. Her fighter's reactor overloaded inside the enemy vessel, turning the massive battleship into a brief new. "Star, tell my mom I'm bringing home souvenirs," she transmitted just before the explosion, her escape pod already racing toward a human rescue ship. Across the system, similar scenes played out as human forces demonstrated tactics that no galactic military had ever seen. Ships that seemed to be retreating suddenly turned and attacked. Fighters that appeared to be damaged revealed themselves to be perfectly functional. Most confusing of all, human commanders seemed to be able to coordinate their forces without any visible communication. The truth was simpler than the Vorthans could imagine. Human crews had trained together for so long that they could predict each other's actions with uncanny accuracy. When one ship moved left, its companion automatically moved right. When a squadron leader saw an opportunity, the rest of the formation was already moving to support the attack. Dr. Maria Santos monitored the battle from the medical bay of the Ranger, preparing to treat both human casualties and rescued Meridians. She watched the tactical display with a mixture of pride and fear as human ships danced through formations of enemy vessels that should have destroyed them easily. The liberation of Kepler took 4 hours. When it was over, 270 Vorthan ships had been destroyed or disabled, while the human fleet had lost only 6 vessels. More importantly, 3 million Meridian civilians had been rescued from the mining operations and were being evacuated to safety. The news of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had given up hope began to whisper that maybe the old stories were true. Maybe the humans really had returned. On Nexus Prime, Dr. Zeflon received the battle reports with growing excitement. His research team was working around the clock, translating more ancient fragments that revealed the true scope of humanity's legendary status. They had found records from dozens of different species, all telling the same story. Humans did not just fight in the ancient wars. They had ended them. Admiral Ben Foster sat in his office deep beneath the Colorado mountains, reviewing casualty reports and planning the next phase of Earth's return to galactic affairs. The easy battles were over. Soon, humanity would face the full might of the Vorthan Empire, and the real war would begin. He activated a secure communication channel that connected him directly to the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. When Ambassador Kethara's image appeared on his screen, he delivered a message that would echo through history. "This is Admiral Foster of the Earth Defense Force," he said in a voice that carried the weight of 3 centuries of preparation. "The Vorthan Empire has committed genocide against innocent species. This aggression cannot stand. Humanity is going to war." Emperor Vashtok stood in his throne room on Vorthan Prime, watching the holographic display that showed the steady retreat of his forces across the galaxy. Red markers indicated lost systems, yellow showed worlds under attack, and green represented the few remaining strongholds of his once mighty empire. There was far too much red on the map. "How many ships do we have left?" he demanded from his military advisor, War Prime Kethal. "Approximately 5,000 vessels, my emperor," Kethal replied, his voice trembling with barely controlled fear. "The humans have destroyed over half of our fleet in just 3 months." Vashatok's clawed hands gripped the armrests of his throne until the metal groaned under the pressure. The Vorthan Empire had ruled through fear for over 1,000 years, conquering every species they encountered with overwhelming force. Now they were being systematically dismantled by creatures that looked like children. "They cannot be stopped?" the Emperor asked. "No, my lord. Our battle computers cannot predict their movements, our weapons cannot target their ships effectively, and their tactics—" Kethal paused, struggling to find words. "They fight like nothing in our databases. They turn our own strengths against us." Through the great windows of the throne room, Vashatok could see his capital city stretching to the horizon. Millions of Vorthans lived in the towering spires that reached toward the purple sky, all of them depending on him to protect them from the advancing human fleet. Captain John Mitchell stood on the bridge of the EDS Vengeance, studying the tactical display that showed Vorthan Prime and its defending fleet. 5,000 enemy ships surrounded the planet in the most formidable defensive formation he had ever seen. His own fleet numbered only 200 vessels, but every one of them was crewed by humans who understood that today would decide the fate of the galaxy. "They've learned from our previous battles," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake. "The defensive formation is designed to counter every strategy we've used so far." John smiled grimly. The Vorthons had made the same mistake that every enemy in human history had made. They assumed that because humans had used certain tactics before, those were the only tactics humans knew. "Signal all ships," John ordered. "Operation Homecoming is now active. Today we show the galaxy what it really means to fight like a human." The human fleet spread out in what appeared to be a standard attack formation, approaching Vorthon Prime from multiple directions. The alien defenders opened fire as soon as the human ships came within range, filling space with enough energy to destroy small moons. But the human vessels were not where the Vorthons expected them to be. Major Nicole Chen crouched in the cargo bay of a transport ship that was officially listed as destroyed in the previous battle. Around her, 200 of Earth's finest Marines checked their equipment one last time. They had been floating in space for 6 hours, playing dead while Vorthon patrols passed by without noticing them. "Remember the mission," Nicole told her troops. "We're not here to conquer. We're here to liberate. The Vorthon civilians are not our enemies." The transport ship's engines came to life as it joined the main assault, carrying its hidden cargo toward the planet's surface. Nicole had studied every piece of intelligence about Vorthon society, learning to distinguish between soldiers and civilians, between those who supported the Empire and those who were simply trapped by it. General Paul Walker coordinated the ground assault from his command ship in orbit, watching as human forces landed at strategic points across Vorthon Prime. His Marines moved through the alien cities like ghosts, appearing wherever they were needed most and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The Vorthons had expected a brutal siege that would level their cities and slaughter their people. Instead, they found human soldiers who fought with surgical precision, targeting only military installations while going to extraordinary lengths to protect civilian populations. In the capital city's central district, a Vorthon family huddled in their home as the sounds of battle raged outside. When human soldiers kicked down their door, the parents expected the worst. Instead, the Marines quickly checked the building for enemy combatants and then left medical supplies and food rations before moving on to their next objective. "Why did they help us?" the young Vorthon child asked her mother. The mother had no answer. In 1,000 years of imperial conquest, no enemy had ever shown mercy to Vorthon civilians. The battle for the Imperial Palace lasted 18 hours. General Walker's forces surrounded the massive structure while Emperor Vashatok made his final stand with his personal guard. The building was a fortress designed to withstand planetary bombardment, its walls thick enough to stop any conventional weapon. But humans had never been conventional warriors. Instead of trying to break through the palace walls, human engineers found the building's water supply, air circulation system, and power grid. Within hours, the palace was dark, the air was growing stale, and the Emperor's guards were getting thirsty. "Surrender now, and your people will be treated with honor," General Walker broadcast directly to the throne room. "Continue to resist, and your guards will die of thirst while you watch." Emperor Vashtok had ruled through fear for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. Now, surrounded by enemies who had outthought him at every turn, he finally understood why the ancient legends spoke of humans with such terror. How do you fight an enemy that values your people's lives more than you do? he transmitted back, his voice carrying a mixture of defeat and genuine confusion. The surrender of Vorthan Prime was broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of the Empire for generations watched as human soldiers accepted the Emperor's surrender with dignity and respect. There were no executions, no looting, no revenge killings. Instead, human administrators began the complex work of transitioning the Vorthan worlds from an empire built on conquest to a society based on cooperation. They established schools where young Vorthans could learn about concepts like individual rights and representative government. They built hospitals where alien civilians could receive medical care without regard for their species or political beliefs. Dr. Maria Santos found herself treating wounded Vorthans alongside injured humans, working with alien doctors who had never imagined that former enemies could become colleagues. The hospital she established in the capital became a symbol of the new galaxy that humanity was helping to create. Captain John Mitchell stood in the ruins of the Imperial throne room, looking at the massive chair where the Emperor had ruled his subjects through fear. The room would become a museum, a reminder of what happened when power was used without wisdom or mercy. On Earth, Admiral Ben Foster received reports from across the former Vorthan Empire. Human forces were helping to rebuild devastated worlds, establishing fair governments, and teaching former subjects that they had rights that no ruler could take away. The war was over, but humanity's real work was just beginning. They had proven that the legends were true. Humans were the most dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Now they had to prove something even more important, that they were worthy of the power they had claimed. 6 months after the fall of the Vorthan Empire, the galaxy looked completely different. On the former capital world of Vorthan Prime, children who had never known freedom played in parks that human engineers had built where military barracks once stood. The purple sky above the city was cleaner now, free from the smoke of weapons factories and slave labor camps. Admiral Ben Foster walked through the streets of the rebuilt capital, watching as former enemies worked together to create something that had never existed before, a truly peaceful society. Vorthan civilians stopped to thank him as he passed, their translator devices converting their gratitude into words he could understand. "Admiral Foster," called a familiar voice behind him. He turned to see Dr. Zephlon approaching, the insectoid, historian moving more quickly than usual despite his advanced age. "Doctor," Ben replied with a smile, "how goes the research project?" Zephlon's compound eyes sparkled with excitement. "Better than I ever hoped. We have found the complete records, now hidden in archives across 50 different worlds, the truth about humanity's first time among the stars." They walked together toward the new Galactic Archive building, where teams of scholars from dozens of species worked to piece together the real history of the galaxy. What they had discovered was more incredible than any legend. Humans had not simply been warriors in the ancient conflicts. They had been teachers, explorers, diplomats, and healers. They had helped dozens of species develop space travel, establish fair governments, and resolve conflicts without violence. The galaxy had flourished under their guidance for over 1,000 years. "So why did we leave?" Ben asked. Though he suspected, he already knew the answer. "Fear," Zephlon replied sadly. The other species grew afraid of human potential. They saw how quickly humans could adapt, how effectively they could fight when necessary, how naturally they could lead others. Some species began to worry that humans would eventually dominate the entire galaxy. Ben nodded. It was an old story, repeated throughout human history, on their own world. People feared what they did not understand, and they especially feared those who were different from themselves. The final break came during something called the Unity Crisis, Zeflon continued. A group of human leaders proposed creating a true galactic government where all species would have equal representation. Some aliens saw this as an attempt at human conquest and formed a coalition to force humanity to leave known space. And we went, Ben said quietly. You went. Peacefully, without fighting back, even though you could have won any war they started. The records show that human leaders chose exile rather than civil conflict that would have torn the galaxy apart. They had reached the archive building, where Captain Lisa Brooks was waiting for them. She had been promoted to Admiral after the liberation of 17 star systems and now commanded the Earth Expeditionary Force. Her mission had evolved from military conquest to something far more complex, teaching the galaxy how to govern itself. Admiral Foster, Lisa said with a salute. We've received the latest reports from the integration teams. The results are beyond our best projections. She led them to a conference room where holographic displays showed the status of former Vortan worlds. Green indicators marked successful transitions to democratic government. Blue showed worlds where humanitarian aid was still needed, and yellow indicated regions where human advisors were helping to establish new institutions. There were no red indicators on the map. Every single world was making progress. The Meridians have established their first elected parliament, Lisa reported. The Zephyrians are teaching former Vorthon slaves how to read and write. Even the Corvani have volunteered to help with reconstruction efforts on damaged worlds. Dr. Maria Santos entered the room carrying a data pad filled with medical reports. As head of the Interspecies Health Initiative, she had been working with alien doctors to establish hospitals and medical schools throughout the former empire. The Vorthons are adapting faster than we expected, she announced. Their children especially are embracing the new educational systems. We're seeing the first generation of young Vorthons who understand concepts like individual rights and personal freedom. Commander Alex Turner had spent the last 6 months training the new Galactic Defense Force, teaching alien officers how to work together as equals rather than as conquerors and subjects. His integrated fleets now patrolled the Outer Rim, protecting shipping routes and responding to distress calls from any species that needed help. The joint exercises are going well, Alex reported. Corvani aggression, Meridian creativity, Delaney, diplomacy, and human adaptability. When they work together, they're stronger than any of them could be alone. Admiral Foster looked at the reports with satisfaction, but also with concern. He had been a military officer his entire life, and he knew that peace was always more fragile than war. What about the outer regions? He asked. Any new threats developing? Lisa activated a star chart that showed the galaxy's edge, far beyond the borders of known civilization. We've detected unusual energy signatures from several unexplored systems. Long-range sensors suggest massive fleets moving in deep space. Another. Empire like the Vorthons? Alex asked. Possibly worse, Lisa replied grimly. The energy patterns don't match any known technology. Whatever's out there has been watching our war with the Vorthons, and they're moving closer to inhabited space. Before anyone could respond, an urgent communication signal interrupted the meeting. The face of Captain Danny Rodriguez appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from his patrol ship near the Galactic Rim. Admiral Foster, we're receiving a distress signal from beyond the edge of known space, Danny reported. Multiple species under attack by an unknown force. They're asking for immediate assistance. Ben looked around the room at his senior officers. seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity through 3 centuries of exile and 6 months of war. They had rebuilt the galaxy once. If necessary, they would do it again. "Signal all available ships," he ordered. "Earth Defense Force, Galactic Defense Force, and any allied vessels that can reach the coordinates. Looks like our work isn't finished. Yet." Admiral Lisa Brooks was already moving toward the door, heading for her ship. As she reached the threshold, she turned back to address the room. "This is Admiral Brooks of the Earth Defense Force," she said, echoing the words that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy. "Help is on the way." The legends had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians. And sometimes, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The combined fleet that assembled at the edge of known space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels flew alongside former Vorthon warships that had been converted for peacekeeping duties. Meridian crystal ships sparkled next, to the sleek fighters of the Delani Aquatic Forces. Even the aggressive Corvani had sent their finest vessels to join the rescue mission. Admiral Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of the EDS Liberty, watching as nearly 200 ships from 8 different species formed up for the journey into unexplored territory. 6 months ago, most of these species had been either enemies or strangers. Now they were working together as a unified force. "All ships report ready for jump," announced Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips from the communications station. She had survived her heroic fighter crash during the liberation of Kepler and now served as Lisa's senior communications officer. "Signal from the Galactic Council," reported Commander Alex Turner from his position at the tactical display. "Ambassador Keth Ara wishes us luck and reminds us that we carry the hopes of 12 billion beings." Lisa nodded grimly. The distress signals from beyond the rim had been growing stronger and more desperate over the past week. Entire star systems were going dark, their final transmissions speaking of ships that moved like living things and weapons that could drain the life from entire planets. "Begin the jump sequence," Lisa ordered. "All ships, follow the Liberty. We're going to find out what's hiding in the dark." The fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the safety of mapped space for regions that no galactic civilization had ever explored. They were heading toward signals that spoke of horrors beyond imagination, but they were also carrying something that the galaxy had forgotten how to use: hope. 3 days of travel brought them to a system where 5 different species had once thrived on as many worlds. Now those planets hung silent in space, their surfaces covered with a strange, dark substance that seemed to absorb all light. The cities that had once sparkled with life were nothing but empty shells. "Life signs?" Lisa asked Dr. Maria Santos, who was running every scanner the fleet possessed. "Nothing," Maria replied, her voice tight with worry. "Not just no intelligent life. No life at all. It's like something drained every living thing from these worlds and left behind empty husks." Captain John Mitchell's voice crackled over the communication system from his scout ship. "Admiral, you need to see this. We've found survivors on the edge of the system, hiding in an asteroid field. The refugee ships they discovered were barely functional, held together with emergency repairs and powered by failing reactors. The beings inside represented species that none of the galactic databases had ever recorded: tall, graceful creatures with silver skin and large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Through translators, their leader identified herself as Keeper Sil Andra of the Eternal Archive. Her people were the last survivors of a civilization that had existed for over 10,000 years, dedicated to preserving knowledge and maintaining the balance between order and chaos in the universe. The Devourers came from beyond the void, Silandra explained as she stood in the medical bay of the Liberty. They are not like any life we have encountered. They consume not just matter and energy, but the very essence of existence itself. Wherever they pass, reality becomes less. Admiral Ben Foster, who had joined the fleet aboard his flagship, studied the data that the refugees had provided. The enemy they faced was unlike anything in human military doctrine or galactic history. These beings could apparently manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe itself. "How do you fight something that can drain life from an entire planet?" asked Commander Turner. "You do not fight them," Silandra replied sadly. "You run. You hide. You hope they pass by without noticing you. We are the last of 17 species that tried to resist. The others are gone, not just dead, but erased from existence as if they had never been." The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. The combined fleet represented the strongest military force the galaxy had ever assembled, but if the refugees were correct, even their combined might would be useless against an enemy that could unmake reality itself. "There is one thing," Silandra said hesitantly. "In our oldest archives, we found references to a species that once faced the Devourers and survived. The records are incomplete, but they speak of beings who possessed something the Devourers could not consume, an essence that grew stronger when challenged rather than weaker." Dr. Zephlon, who had insisted on joining the expedition despite his advanced age, clicked his mandibles in recognition. "The ancient human legends speak of something similar. They called it the human spirit, an indomitable will that could not be broken by any force." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying that humans fought these things before?" "Perhaps," the historian replied. "The oldest fragments mention a great darkness that threatened to consume all existence, and warriors who stood against it, not with weapons or technology, but with something far more powerful, the refusal to surrender." Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Captain Danny Rodriguez's voice crackled over the emergency channel from his patrol ship at the edge of the formation. "Contact! Multiple ships approaching from the outer system. They're not like anything I've ever seen." The main display showed vessels that seemed to be made of solid darkness, their hulls absorbing light and energy from the surrounding space. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested intelligence, but not intelligence as any known species understood it. "All ships, battle stations," Lisa ordered, though she wondered if conventional weapons would have any effect on an enemy that could drain the life from entire worlds. The Devourers had found them. As the two fleets closed on each other, Silandra placed a gentle hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Remember, Admiral, if the legends are true, humans have faced this darkness before and survived. Perhaps you carry within you the key to victory that the rest of us have lost." Lisa looked out at the approaching enemy ships and felt something stirring in her chest, not fear, but determination. Whether the legends were true or not, humanity had never learned how to surrender. Today, the galaxy would discover if that ancient stubbornness was enough to hold back the darkness that threatened to consume everything. The real test of human legend was about to begin. The first Devourer ship that entered weapons range simply absorbed every shot fired at it. Energy beams, missiles, and plasma bolts disappeared into its dark hull without causing any visible damage. The vessel seemed to drink in the attacks, growing larger and more solid with each hit. "Cease fire! All ships cease fire!" Admiral Lisa Brooks shouted into her communication system as she watched her fleet's weapons make the enemy stronger instead of weaker. "Fall back to defensive positions." But it was already too late for the Corvani heavy cruiser Thunder's Edge. The aggressive wolf-like species had ignored the ceasefire order and continued their attack, pouring everything they had into the nearest Devourer vessel. The dark ship turned toward them like a predator noticing prey. Captain Morgeth of the Thunder's Edge realized his mistake when his ship's lights began to dim. The Devourer wasn't just absorbing his weapons, it was draining power directly from his vessel's reactors. Emergency alarms wailed as life support systems began to fail throughout the ship. "All crew to escape pods," Morgeth ordered, but even as his people abandoned ship, the pods themselves began to lose power as soon as they launched. The Devourer was consuming not just energy and matter, but the very force that gave them meaning. Dr. Maria Santos watched in horror from the Liberty's medical bay as the readings from the Corvani ship flatlined one by one. First, the reactor signatures disappeared. Then the life support indicators. Finally, even the basic molecular cohesion that held the ship together. Within minutes, the Thunder's Edge simply faded away as if it had never existed. "The crew?" Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. "Gone," Maria replied quietly. "Not dead. Gone. There are no remains, no debris, no trace that they ever lived." The Devourer fleet continued their approach, moving with the patient certainty of beings who had consumed entire civilizations. There were 12 of the dark vessels, each one roughly the size of a human battleship, but seemingly made from the absence of light itself. Commander Alex Turner studied his tactical displays with growing desperation. Every military strategy he had ever learned was useless against an enemy that grew stronger when attacked. How do you fight something that feeds on the very act of fighting? "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips from her communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead Devourer ship." The voice that filled the Liberty's bridge was like the sound of stars dying, cold, ancient, and completely without emotion. It spoke in a language that the translators couldn't process, but somehow every person who heard it understood the meaning perfectly. "We remember you, children of the third world. You have grown strong since last we fed upon your kind. Your essence will make us complete." Keeper Silandra, who had been standing quietly near the rear of the bridge, suddenly stepped forward with her large eyes wide with recognition. "Admiral, the transmission. It's not coming through the communication system. They're speaking directly into our minds." "How is that possible?" Lisa asked. "The same way they consume life itself," Silandra replied. "They exist partially outside normal reality. They can touch thoughts and dreams as easily as we touch physical objects." The lead Devourer ship was now close enough that its dark presence could be felt by every person in the Allied fleet. Human crew members reported feeling cold despite normal ship temperatures. Alien species found their natural abilities beginning to fade. The Delaney's telepathic connections grew weak. The Meridian's crystal resonance became muted. Even the Corvani's enhanced senses began to fail. Captain John Mitchell's scout ship was the closest to the enemy formation, and his reports were becoming increasingly disturbing. "Admiral, my crew is reporting strange dreams. nightmares about being alone in infinite darkness. Some of them are starting to forget things, their names, their families, why they joined the fleet. Lisa felt the same cold touch at the edges of her own mind, whispering doubts and fears that she had never experienced before. The Devourers weren't just consuming matter and energy. They were feeding on hope, courage, and the connections between living beings. But then she remembered something that Silandra had said in the refugee camp. The ancient records spoke of warriors who possessed an essence that grew stronger when challenged rather than weaker. Lisa looked around her bridge at the human crew members who were still functioning despite the psychic assault. "Katie," she called to her communications officer. "Can you still reach the other human ships?" "Yes, Admiral," Kate replied, though her voice sounded strained. "Human comm systems are still working normally. It's like the Devourers can't drain our technology the same way they drain everyone else's." "Signal all human vessels," Lisa ordered. "Fall back to the center of the formation. I want every non-human ship to take shelter behind our vessels." As the human ships moved into protective positions, something unexpected happened. The Allied fleet systems began to stabilize. Delaney telepaths found their abilities returning when they stayed close to human vessels. Meridian crystal ships began to resonate again when shielded by human hulls. Dr. Zeflon, monitoring the phenomenon from his position at the science station, made a startling discovery. "Admiral, the humans aren't just resistant to the Devourer effect, you're actively counteracting it. Your presence is creating zones where normal reality remains stable." The lead Devourer ship sent another mental transmission, but this time, there was something different in its ancient voice, confusion, perhaps even concern. "Impossible. You were consumed before. We drained your worlds and erased your people from existence. How do you still burn with inner fire?" Admiral Ben Foster's voice crackled over the fleet communications from his flagship. "All ships. I'm reading. Massive energy buildup from the Devourer vessels. I think we've made them angry." The dark ships began to glow with an unholy light as they prepared to unleash whatever terrible weapons they possessed. But instead of retreating, Lisa felt a familiar sensation rising in her chest. The same stubborn determination that had carried humanity through every war they had ever fought. "All human vessels, prepare for close combat," she ordered. "We're going to show these things why legends never really die." The battle for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin.